for today's webinar. Shri Dilip Kurdi from Maharashtra is today going to talk on Corona and the need for a new lifestyle. Dilip is a very close well-wisher of Vivekananda Kendra for a number of years. In fact, he was working for our Marathi Prakashana Vibhag. He started our Marathi Prakashana Vibhag from Pune and used to edit our quarterly called Vivek Vichar. Subsequently, Dilip settled in a very remote village called Kudavle in Konkan area of Maharashtra. As Sridhar told that he is an environmentalist, he has written a number of books on environment as well as sustainable lifestyle. Unlike others, he not only talks but he also walks. Whatever he talks. And that's why whenever he talks with a lot of conviction. Since last few years, he is warning all of us that we are crossing our limit, and if we don't mend our waves, then the nature will take revenge. Fortunately or unfortunately, Corona has come, and now whether we want it or don't want it, we are forced to change our lifestyle. So today, he will be talking on this particular subject. He is in a very remote place where getting a line is very, very difficult. So what we have done, we have recorded his speech half an hour, which will be played. And afterward, there will be a panel discussion by three members. And subsequent to that, there will be a question answer session. So this is the basic format. Now, instead of taking more time, I request Sridhar to start his lecture on Corona and the need for the new lifestyle. Thank you.
Today, the whole world is passing through a very bad phase called Corona pandemic. The coronavirus has spread all over the world, and many people are dying, many are affected by that. The economies of the nations are in deep troubles. And we are facing an unforeseen problem, and a problem that has never occurred in the human history. But I always think that we're looking at the whole scenario from human beings' point of view. We are facing health problems, we are dying, our economy is in deep troubles. It is our viewpoint to look at the scenario. From nature's point of view, from the ecocentric point of view, as we call, not as a homocentric or anthropocentric point of view, but from the ecocentric point of view, I think it's just a corrective mechanism from the side of nature. Human beings have played a lot of mischief with nature. We have disturbed the balance of nature, and nature is just doing something that will remove the imbalance and re-establish the balance once again. Because for nature, maintaining the equilibrium, that is the its goal, we can say. For last 2.5 centuries, after say 1750, we can say to be specific, we are hell-bent on destroying the nature. The nature cycles, the nature system, we are destroying through our activities, especially the activities which are done through industrialization. Basically, it is the use of non-renewable resources, non-renewable energies, lot of transportation, lot of packaging, so many things we are doing. And all these activities are destroying the nature. Resources are depleting, energy sources are depleting, pollution is on the rise, pollution of all sorts, chemical pollution, radiation pollution, microwave pollution, then ozone depletion, so many type of pollution are there. Global warming, basically pollution of CO2 increase. So many pollutions we are increasing. Water is being polluted, soil is being polluted. So many activities we are doing which are destroying nature. Waste is increasing, degradable waste, non-degradable waste. Both the types of waste are increasing. Biodiversity is decreasing alarmingly. And we find that our attack or aggression on nature is multifaceted. And nature is getting disturbed, the cycles are getting disturbed, the whole system is getting disturbed and to a certain extent destroyed also. So nature wanted to rectify the whole thing. It wanted to re-establish the balance. And for that, I think controlling the human activities that are done through industrialization was a necessary thing. And so it chose a very, I would say, a very ingenious way to control all this. And that was that is the coronavirus. Actually, virus did not do anything to industries. The virus did not do anything to aeroplanes, to vehicles and anything, or railways. But it has miraculously worked on all this and corrected everything. Because it attacked the human beings. And the fear of death of human beings resulted in lockdown of the whole nations. And then industries were closed down, no transportation, no aeroplanes, no railways, no road traffic, nothing. Malls were closed, shops were closed, hotels were closed, everything were closed. People are stranded in their houses, they are stuck up in their houses, offices are closed. And so the whole human activity, of the economic activity, we can say, has come to a standstill. And it is the fear of death due to corona that has resulted in a good situation, a benign situation for nature. Because as the industries closed down, as the traffic closed down, conservation of resources automatically started. The resource consumption has reduced greatly and they are getting conserved. The pollution, it has come down drastically. People say that from Jalandhar you can see the Himalayan snow peaks and all that. The rivers are flowing clean. And then you are seeing birds and other the peacocks and other creatures on the roads also. And it's a good thing for all other species than human beings, which actually should be the situation. And this has happened due to corona. So from nature's point of view, from the ecocentric point of view, it's a blessing in disguise for the nature. And I think it's an ingenious way of nature to control the human activities and especially the industrialization. Within a couple of months, the whole corona, it became a pandemic, and then the whole world is in the fear, and so many people have died, especially in the developed countries. People have died like anything. In India, the situation is much better than that. Maybe our immunity is good because we don't follow the Western method of living and Western model of development rigorously. But in India also, we decided to lock down. Firstly, it was a total lockdown. Then it's a partial lockdown. The lockdown is being removed or slightly relaxed to a certain extent. But even then, people are afraid of this corona pandemic. Now, I always look at this thing not from the human point of view, but from the nature's point of view, as I said earlier. Because nature is a dominant entity. Whatever human beings do, we think that we are conquering nature, but it is not the case. Nature can never be conquered. The natural forces are too big to be conquered. And so through a trivial thing like coronavirus, nature has controlled the human activities of industrialization, transportation, and market and all that. So my point of view is that we must learn a certain lesson from this. We must always understand, as an environmentalist, I always feel that we must understand that whatever development we are doing today is not the real development. It is the economic growth. We are erroneously equating economic growth with development, and this economic growth is at the cost of nature. By destroying nature, by depleting resources, by polluting the environment, and by reducing the biodiversity, we are achieving economic growth. This particular thing called development is basically wrong. This cannot be total development. Development has to take place along with nature. It cannot be against the nature. So there should not be any controversy between what nature wants and what human beings want. Ultimately, nature wins and human beings are defeated. And so if we want to avoid defeats, such type of defeats in future, we will have to do everything in tune with nature. Now, how the nature system works? It works on certain principles, and we must follow these principles in our activities, individual activities, as well as social or national activities. The first thing is cyclicity. In nature, everything works on basis of cyclicity. Whereas for human beings, linearity, linear growth is our goal. I think it is the time has now arrived that we to put aside this our concept of linear growth, and our growth should be cyclic growth. Growth and reduction, they go hand in hand. And so what nature gives continuously should be the basis for our living. There cannot be constant growth. When resources are limited or resources are finite, there cannot be infinite growth. When resources are cyclic, there cannot be linear or exponential growth. So our use of resources should be only of the cyclic resources, those resources which are available to us cyclically and at a uniform pace. So basically it is air, water, soil, wood. That always nature gives it, constantly refreshes itself and gives back to us for use. So our whole economy will have that outer limit of environment. How many renewable resources are available and at what pace they are available. So our economic activities should be within that limit. The availability of natural resources in quantity and in time. Secondly, the same thing about energies. In the 1750s, the new era started of industrialization because we went for a source of energy that was coal or steam, as we call it, which was a produced sort of energy. Until that time, the whole human race, we can say whole human society, for centuries, for millennia, they were living only on the renewable resources, namely sun and wood. Coal was not used, steam was not used, petroleum was not used, electricity was not used. They are all invented after 1750. And so the destruction of nature started after 1750. Before 1750, there was civilization, but that civilization was in tune with nature. It was within the limits of nature. The economy at that time, there was an economy at that time, but it was a sort of steady state economy. It was not the growth economy. The growth economy started after 1750 when we had a continuously larger supply of energies. Due to larger supply, continuously larger supply of energies, technology became bigger and bigger. Earlier, prior to 1750, what technology human beings were using was very small, or in today's terms we can call it was an appropriate technology. It was a small scale technology. Its impact on nature was very less. Its environmental impact was very low impact technology. After 1750, as the energy started, we started producing more energy, the technology became bigger. It became it started creating more impact on nature, and destruction of nature started. So I think we should now limit our usage of energy as well as technology. But I don't think technology will have to be given attention to. If we reduce the use of energy, technology will become small and small. It will go on becoming smaller because technology is a function of energy. When energy reduces, technology becomes smaller and slower. So I think we should focus more on energy. Same thing about resources. When energy usage is more, energy quantity is more resources are used, more resources are depleted. When energy usage reduces, we use softer energies, the resource part of nature is taken care of. Automatically, the resources start getting conserved and they don't deplete at all. So due to it is the energy, 1750 is the watershed year because we invented steam at that time. So I think we'll have to go beyond, we'll have to go prior to that time once again. It is the total wrong era of industrialization and development of 250 years, 2.5 centuries. We will have to go back before that time, where people were using energies, people were using resources, they were polluting, they were creating waste, but all was within limits of nature. I think we will have to go to that state once again. We cannot go on increasing our GDP or per capita consumption or per capita production. So that I think is the message that we can take from the corona pandemic. that we will have to downsize our economy. We cannot have a constant economic growth. We can only have a steady state economy where there is a steady inflow of resources and energies, steady pollution, which can be rectified or corrected or purified by nature. Whatever waste is generated, nature can degrade that waste. It will be degradable waste basically. There will be no non-degradable waste that will be getting created. There is a direct relation between non-renewable resources and non-degradable waste. Basically, we talk of plastics. It is produced from non-renewable resource called petroleum oil. When we stop using petroleum, plastics will not be produced. So all the waste that get produced will automatically be within the limits of nature. It will be degradable. Secondly, we will have to reduce the pace of our own life. We want everything fast and faster and faster. No, it can't be. Because for going faster ahead, we use more energies, we use more resources. And if we want to live within the limits of nature, this pace of life that we have achieved today has no place. And I think nature has shown us through Corona pandemic that the pace of life need not be so high. All the aeroplanes are not flying, the railways are not moving, the buses and other vehicles are stand still. They are not on the roads. They are in their garage, and nothing much has happened. People are very living in their home. Okay, they are slightly unhappy because they are stranded there. They are locked down in their houses. But we have to think that is so much of transportation necessary? Is so much of traveling necessary? Does it have any meaning? Why did the corona spread to all over the world? It is because of the air traffic. We are unnecessarily moving from one country to another just because we have energy and just because there is money in my pocket. We pay for the aeroplane and we fly. We go for tourism, we go for job, we go for business. What is the need? The nature's model is one of decentralization. Today we are trying to centralize everything, and that centralization requires so much of transportation and traveling. In nature system, just cyclicity is one of the facets of nature system. Decentralized way of working is the nature's way. Nature does not centralize anything, because through decentralization, nature tries to distribute the workload equally all over the places. For example, nature produces oxygen, but does it get produced at one point and distributed everywhere through pipes or to trailers or to tankers and all that? No. Each and every leaf of a plant, each and every green atom of the green material called chlorophyll, it is the producer of oxygen. So all over the surface of the earth, there are green plants and they are producing oxygen. It rains everywhere. Trees grow everywhere. Small vegetative growth is there everywhere. Animals live everywhere. Creatures live everywhere. They eat food everywhere, or it is decentralized. They effecate everywhere. The effecated material gets degraded everywhere. So the whole nature system works on decentralization, because decentralization is based on less use of energy. As soon as we start centralization, usage of energy increases. After 1750, we got the energies in our hand. We had energies in our hand, and due to that, what happened is centralization of the whole activity started, called as industrialization. Due to industrialization, the second thing that came up was urbanization. It was the concentration of population. And both the things we find today, they are severely affected by corona. It is the industrialized part of the world, industrialized part of the nation, it is affected more. Rural areas, which are more decentralized, which are more in tune with nature, they are not so much affected by corona pandemic. So nature is trying to tell us that decentralize your whole thing. You can have a certain quantity of economic growth or economic development, but that should be a decentralized form of development. One more point I would like to put forward is that due to corona, what has come to a standstill are the mechanical processes, the factories, the transportation, the traveling, and all that. All the mechanical processes that are taking place on the face of the earth, they have come to a standstill. All the organic processes, they are going smoothly. There is no, corona has created no problem for them. Trees are growing, new trees are, the seeds are falling on the ground, new plants are growing. Then human beings are all their organic activities. They're eating food, they're defecating, new babies are getting born. All the human activities which are organic in nature, they are continuing without any problem. Does nature is nature trying to tell us that we should reduce the mechanical activity that we are doing? I think we will have to think in these terms also. Nature is telling us that all the mechanical activities we are doing have no place on this earth. So such type of industrialization, such type of markets, such type of communication, such type of industrialization, it doesn't have any place on the face of the earth. We must live without all this. Then what will be the situation like? If we go for this type of scenario, what will be the situation? I think this situation is very much what Mahatma Gandhi told us. It is the Grama Swavalamban. There should be a decentralized, rural-based country should be there, where there are lakhs of villages are there, millions of villages are there, and they are self-reliant. Almost whatever are the basic necessities, they're fulfilling their needs through through whatever they get within the radius of say 5 kilometer radius. Whatever they get, they're fulfilling all the basic necessities of food, basically shelter, and some other things. And there should be least mutual dependence. There should be some there can be some mutual dependence with neighbors, but it should be minimum. It should be the least interdependence that is to be reduced. So Gandhiji called this as Grama Swavalamban. And Gandhiji was told this in Indian language, and in modern language, an American fellow, who is a world famous fellow called Alvin Toffler, he called this particular scenario of human establishment or human settlement as a prosumer society, where producer and consumer is local. We produce for our own consumption and we consume what we produce. So he calls this as a prosumer society, which is just, I think, an translation of Gandhian concept of Grama Swavalamban. And I think nature is trying to tell us that you will have to follow this particular type of human settlement. It should be decentralized and it should be self-sufficient. Whatever resources we use in this particular scenario will be renewable resources. Whatever energies we will be using, they will be renewable. So whatever pollution will take place, it will be very less. If we use solar energy or we use wood, firewood, then whatever CO2 emission is there, it is absorbed by the trees that are there in the vicinity. So the process becomes a carbon neutral process, as against a carbon positive process where we burn petroleum today and we only emit carbon dioxide in the air, and that is getting accumulated and creating the problem of global warming. To avoid that, our burning of fuel can be there. Nature allows that, but it should be within limits of nature. That means it should be a carbon neutral process. You can cut wood from the trees, burn it in the chula, CO2 is emitted, and it is used for again forming the wood of the trees. So the process should be local, and this is called as a carbon neutral process. Solar energy man is using from ancient times for so many things, for drying clothes or for heating our own bodies in winter or for drying the food grains in the fields. We're using solar energy. But this is a passive use of solar energy. And that is only the viable and good use, benign use of solar energy. We should use solar energy more does not mean that we should use solar panels. No, solar panels have no place on the face of the earth, on the earth. The solar panel is a negative form of energy. One solar panel, it requires much more energy than what it produces. So it's a negative form of energy. So using solar energy through photovoltaic is not the nature's wish. It is not that nature will allow. So we should use solar energy in a passive way. All the passive solar equipments, maybe they can, solar cooker we can use, solar dryer we can use, but not the solar photovoltaic, not the solar panels. So I think based on these principles, we should start living. When we use less outside energy, external energy, or the artificial energy as we call it, produced energy as we call it, we start using internal energy, bodily energy more and more. So again, it becomes a Gandhian principle of Shramadharita Jivan. It should be labor oriented life, and the technology will also be labor oriented. It will be labor intensive as against energy intensive today. This labor intensive technology will have its own benign limits. It will be small, it will be light, its impact on environment will be much less. And so that type of technology, as Schumacher has called it is an appropriate technology, appropriate for the human being, because we will be using our own energy, which is not getting used today. We employ machines for doing each and everything, and then our obesity increases. We don't burn the sugar in the blood, we don't sweat, and then our energy that is we get through eating of food, we are not using it. So that energy has to be used for necessary work. So through necessary work, we'll be using that energy. So it will be good for our health, and that will reduce our dependence on external energy. That will be benign for the nature, because all the sources of energy which are non-renewable, maybe coal, maybe petroleum, maybe uranium, they will get in concert. And then due to that, pollution will decrease. When we use my bodily energy, there is no pollution at all. As against when I use coal, there is pollution. When I use petroleum, there is a lot of pollution. When I use uranium, there is a lot of pollution. So all this pollution will end. Then whatever pollution will take place will be very less, and nature can very well rectify it through the process of photosynthesis. So I think we look for a pattern now, which is based on renewable resources, renewable energies, appropriate technology, bodily labor, and all this will reduce in reduced consumption. Today we call development as increase in per capita consumption. No, that cannot be called as development. Increasing our own consumption is not development. If we consume more and more sugar, it ultimately leads to diabetes. So that is not called as development. That is destruction also of the human body. So it should be a model of development that will be based on frugal consumption. It will be a model based on voluntary simplicity. Through appropriate technology, through renewable resources, through renewable energies, whatever we achieve, only that is allowed for our consumption. We should not opt for more consumption. We should never try to increase our consumption infinitely. Infinite growth in consumption is a fallacy. It ultimately leads to destruction of our own bodies and, of course, the nature externally. So the whole focal point now will become frugal consumption, voluntary simplicity, and whatever are the basic requirements for this type of living, they will be achieved through decentralized living, through use of renewable resources, renewable energies, and appropriate technology. So it becomes a new pattern of development, as we call it. And I think Corona is pointing us that human beings should adopt this particular pattern of development. And I think we must learn this message from Corona, that our whole model of development today is wrong. We are going on the wrong path. But when I look around, I find that people are just waiting for the lockdown to be removed. The nations are eager to again start their economic activity. They are doing so many things that the economic activity should again start. The industry, they are giving so many concessions and so many finances and all that for the industries to start. People are just waiting for the malls to open. People are just waiting to be hotels to be opened. And they are just eager to do all these things, business as usual, as we call it. No, I think we cannot do that. We must learn from Corona that the business as usual is a destructive thing, and we should never go for that business anymore. No more development, no more that type of development. We must go for a new model of development. And I think this model of development has been in practice, maybe in Bhutan or maybe in Cuba also. Cuba was also forced to change its model of development, and Cuba did it very nicely. So we should have these examples before our eyes. The goal of development should not be increased production, infinite production and infinite consumption, but it should be increased happiness. As Bhutan says it, how much gross national happiness increases, not the gross national product. So I think we will have to give attention to Bhutan now. How Cuba achieved full organic system, how Cuba developed itself, I think we must have to give attention to that. And if we don't do that, I think nature will have to take out another weapon, to control human activities. So it will be a very, it will be a further severe action or further severe weapon than corona that nature will have to take out. And we must keep in mind that nature has so many weapons with it. Corona, just after, say, in last June, nobody was knowing that coronavirus will do something within 6 months or a year or so. But nature has taken out that weapon, and the weapon has worked, nicely worked. So we must learn the message from corona that this particular system is wrong, and we will have to change the whole system. And we will have to adopt a new system of development that will be based on principles of nature, cyclicity, the renewability, the mutual dependence, biodiversity, decentralization, honoring the limits. So many principles of nature we will have to adopt when we are trying to develop economically. That development will not be an macroeconomic growth, but it will be a steady state economy. And that steady state economy will result in a lifestyle which will be a lifestyle of voluntary simplicity. I think we should learn this lesson from corona. The sooner we learn it, the better.
Namaste all. It is a very clear message that the nature has everything for man's need and not for man's greed. It's a wonderful video presentation sent by our Dilip Kulkarni ji. We are happy about that. And we have a panel of experts here, 3 panelists who have come here to guide us in this discussion. Let me introduce each one of the panelists in a short way. Sri Krishnamurthy ji, Annaji, is fondly known as Annaji. He's he's a MSc Geology he has completed, and he is an IIT gold medalist. And then he joined Bhutan movement of our Acharya Vinoba ji. And then in the year 1979, he joined Vivekananda Kendra, where almost above 50 years he's contributing in spreading Swami Vivekananda ji's messages to the youth, students, women, and towards the entire country. He's a powerful speaker. He has inspired a lot of people. We call him as a living encyclopedia. He's here to guide us in this discussion of corona and the need for new way of life. And we have another panelist, Adi Narayanan sir. He is the founder of Anadi Foundation. He's a tapasvi and a visionary teacher. He is an adjunct professor of practice at IIT Delhi. He is a TEDx and Srijan talk speaker. With a decade of teaching and a research experience in the academia, he co-founded Anadi Foundation for Societal Wellbeing. He has an MS in Computer Engineering from North Carolina State University and is a fellow of Europe Spirituality in Economics and Society, SPES. Having spent more than 150 days in Mount Tapasya, Sri Adi Narayanan brings the essence of his tapasya in all his lectures and program office. He has taught courses and offered workshops in several institutions in India, including IIT Delhi, IIT Bhu, Banastali University, Gujarat National Law University, and MS Baroda University. He is a core group member of Value Education at MHRD, Government of India, Ministry of Education, India. On behalf of Vivekananda Kendra, Nadav, we welcome you, sir. And we have another panelist who is very close to us, Dr. Madan Kumar. He is right now the CEO of Daan Foundation's housing project, and he's a graduate in BCom. He's a graduate in commerce, MA in sociology, MSc psychology, MPhil psychology, and PhD in management. And he has worked in Vivekananda Kendra as a life worker for almost close to 13 years. And after that, he joined Daan Foundation, and he's in Daan Foundation as a Chief Executive Officer for Daan's housing projects. It is known as Daan Hope. I request the panel of experts to take over the proceedings and guide us in the entire discussion. I request first Annaji, our beloved Annaji, to reflect on the Dilip Kulkarni's presentation for 5 minutes.
Namaskaram everyone. It was a marvelous presentation by Shri Dilip Kulkarni. Having known him for so many years, I was not surprised, but the message was long in coming. Man has been playing with nature. A scientist had the arrogance to say, it is man's privilege to find out the laws by which nature works and impose man's views on science, on nature. That itself is a troublesome process. See what science has done. It has split nature into useful concentrates and a useless thing as waste. Nature doesn't produce such a thing. It is the correct admixture of useful things and what we call refuges. A vitamin is mixed with all fiber so that the human body can consume. In every aspect of nature, it puts things together. Science went on taking things apart. For example, a farm. Whatever is the waste from the farm goes to the cow and the cow eats it. Whatever is the produce from the cow, it goes to the farm. Therefore, there is, was talking about the cyclicity. It is a vertical time-based cyclicity. There is also horizontal cyclicity. Within nature, the complementarity has been very much there. This is what Dilip Kulkarni has been advocating, the village Swavalamba. After 18 years of war in Jaffna, I asked some of the Jaffna people, how did you manage to live? He said, sir, we could produce everything. Whatever we could not produce, we learned to live without it. Warren Hastings says, after 300, 400 years of rule, we could not penetrate into the deepest villages of India because the villages did not depend for their survival for anything outside. If they cannot get anything, they learn to live without it. And whatever is the basic necessity for expressing themselves, their creative aspect, they produce it themselves. Therefore, hundreds of years of Western life could not penetrate our village. Therefore, it is not a very distant dream or it is an impossible dream. Perhaps many scientists will say, oh, nature will not go back, time will not go back. Therefore, we cannot go back to pre-science days and all that. Even today, people have been living in that villages. People have been living with content with whatever they can produce. That is a very good aspect that Dilipji has brought out. Second is this transport. As with all basis of all the mischief. Schumacher says, who has been the chairman of the coal board of England, he said, when man started the concept of footlooseness, unnecessarily roaming about, a stupid fellow going to a far corner of the world, he is not needed there. But the moment he had some problem or crisis in those villages, he started running away. Therefore, this escapist mentality has promoted what you call tourism, what you call migration, what you call globetrotting, whatever you call it. Schumacher says this is the reason for all the transport-inspired pollution that we have got. Therefore, it is all right for a Swami Vivekananda to go across the world and give his message. But ordinary Kopan and Chopin, he should stay where he is, so that he is forced to face the problem. And the third, the population has been too much. There has been one American population lab in New York, one Professor Cohen. He says the earth can support only 200 crores of people if they live the American lifestyle. If they have got an Indian lifestyle, it can support 400 crores. Therefore, the basic life support system, like the Urvara Shakti of the soil, the air, the water, the vegetation and all that, it can support anything between 200 to 400 crores of people. When the number exceeds and it becomes double, nature has to play its own role. And this is only the first stroke by the nature. Scientists like Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking are saying that with the artificial intelligence, it may take over the whole world and produce the kind of war about which the creator, computer engineer himself will know nothing. Therefore, he will be a mute witness to what is happening by the scientific creatures he has created. Therefore, this artificial intelligence, uncontrolled intelligence, self-thinking intelligence is going to be a next problem. Therefore, science, there was one Anne, she has written the environment, the historical roots of environmental degradation. He says, the moment West put God away from nature, away from its own creation, all the problems started. That means nature is not divine, God sits elsewhere. Therefore, she says that is the root cause of all the problem. And the Pridham Chopra says, whether it is the Western physics, whether it is the Western economy, whether it is the Marxian philosophy, all of us are based that nature is not something divine. You can do anything you want with nature and get away with it. Now, this is the paying time for humanity to suffer. Therefore, Dilipji has suggested some very, very practical measures. It may look very far-fetched, but at least Indian, it should not be impossible methods because it is possible for Indians to adopt this way. And Gandhiji in 1908 in Hindu Swaraj, he put it very clearly that tapping nature's resources in an uncontrolled manner, roaming about here and there, unwanted consumption, all these will create endless trouble. But the greatest problem is that of population. Therefore, that Ian Brown's novel, it says, nature will find out some way of destroying. Therefore, now nature is calling man to behave itself. This is the first warning. If we don't heed, the next warning will be much more severe. That is the message that science itself is giving. And the science will always say, we have got all the solutions. In fact, science is a problem as practiced in the West. India had a science, but it is always nature-friendly science. It never fought with nature. Therefore, the Upanishad says, Tatvinapaha Matarishwadadati. Man is a child playing on the lap of Mother Nature. He has forgotten nature is the mother and he is the child. He has started thinking nature is a slave, he is the master. He can meddle with it. And this is the way nature takes revenge upon you. A friend used to say, God is always merciful. Whatever mistake you commit, he always pardons you. Man is sometimes excusing, sometimes revengeful. Therefore, sometimes he may pardon you. But nature being an inanimate thing, it always hits back. It doesn't have this kind of absorbing your thought. Okay, it can put up with your misdeeds for some time, but when it hits back, it hits back. Whether it is earthquake, whether it is volcano, nature goes on storing the unwanted pressures you are putting on nature's system. And when the limits is crossed, it rebounds. That's how earthquakes take place. That's why all the nature's calamity, it has not happened in a day. It goes on storing whatever mistake you have done, misdeed you have done, misbehavior you have showed towards nature. It goes on as a very patient thing. It goes on storing, and when a time comes, it shows back. Therefore, this is one of the first strikes which nature has done. Then if you don't listen, if you don't behave. But Gandhiji never liked people to threaten them and then bring them on the way. It is not Gandhiji's way. He said always, you educate people, good example, educate people. There are good examples available. There are good lessons available. Right from Thoreau's time, right from the Upanishad's time, they have been always showing to the people that nature-friendly life is a very safe life. Therefore, when Gandhiji came from South Africa, he added to the Yama Niyama, Sharira Shrama, the body labor. The human system is such a fine machine. It is a great waste not to tap it. Swami Tejo Mayananda, president of the Chinmaya Mission, used to say, the human being has got 4 times the kidney capacity, some 8 times the heart capacity. And the people use very little of their brain. Therefore, in infinite time, their brain capacity. Therefore, the human body is an excellent mechanism. If we use it, we can do with very, very little of nature's resources. Man is self-contained. Therefore, what is needed from outside, is only some kind of stimulant for bringing out the inherent energies, inherent happiness, inherent goodness of man. Therefore, Corona has given us an opportunity to introspect, to find out our own inner energies, inner happiness, inner potentialities. God has endowed so much of capacity within the human being, and to make a proper use of him, and not to depend, destroy nature for even what he could do with his own physical body is an atrocious behavior. Therefore, a combined approach, an intelligent approach, a very nature-friendly approach, it's not very, very difficult. We got an excellent example. Dilipji has brought out the matter so beautifully. It is for all of us to follow and make our lives happy and make life live on the sacred earth.
Thanks, Anaji. Thanks for your quick reflections. I request Adi Narayanan ji to give some declarations for 5 minutes.
Namaskaram. Thank you for inviting me, and my namaskarams to Krishnamurti Annaji. Vivekananda Kendra has been doing great service for the cause of both the nation and the world at large. And so many things that have been coming up have been in terms of helping people adopt the right path, as Swami Vivekananda has advised. Now, when we look at nature, we can clearly see this has been a time of introspection for the entire world, unprecedented, because this has never happened before. As in the first video, Dilip ji clearly mentioned, this has happened at a scale which is completely unthinkable. Last year, June, we would not have imagined that in 6 months' time this would happen. So that's been the kind of scale and the rapidity. So that means the impact that such things can have across geographical boundaries is phenomenal. So this also means the nature, when it is impacted, if we look at it in a little more detailed manner, if it is impacted in some place on the earth, nature does not follow geographical boundaries. It does not align with national boundaries. If somewhere it's impacted, it impacts life here as well. It impacts life everywhere. So from this, we understand it's very difficult to contain these aspects. So that's where I believe Swami Vivekananda's leadership became very, very important. Many great Mahatmas, including Swami Vivekananda, have clearly said that Indian principles should lead and guide the world. India is the guru of the world. If Mahatmas would not give out statements, without proper reasoning, and hence, it becomes very, very important to guide the world as to what is an appropriate course of action. That's where I believe traditional Indian knowledge systems that both Vivekananda Kendra, NARDEP, and many organizations working at the grassroots level have been looking at need to be brought forth and promoted at a global scale so that others can learn from our best practices. Now, these, what we call as culture, are civilizational best practices. Every organization has best practices. Similarly, as a civilization, we have thousands of years, if not more than that, of best practices, which we call as kalacharam, samskriti. Now, it is not very easy to arrive at these. What we are discussing here is, for us, it might seem like, yes, it's obvious, we are able to appreciate it. But in the global context, to be able to impact the United Nations, to be able to impact, for example, that's where our government succeeded in all the countries coming together to adopt yoga as a way of life and celebrate the International Day of Yoga. such mechanisms become very critical to guide the world along the right lines. And that becomes our responsibility as well. Because we can see if someone does something somewhere, actually nature brings it to the doorstep of everybody. So we also, are at the receiving end of those consequences. Given this scenario, this becomes a very powerful time to introspect and see how our knowledge systems, our technologies of ancient times and those that have been, the thought processes that we have now that have been shared so beautifully, how can they guide the world leaders? So, Dilip ji beautifully mentioned, we don't require growth just to be evaluated along macroeconomic perspectives, but we need a steady state economic growth. So this is a very, very different idea from what most leaders are projecting. Most world leaders don't think along these lines. So as he very poignantly mentioned, right after the lockdown is over, everyone is looking at how to get back to normalcy. And what is that normalcy? It is going back to killing nature. So that's where how do we prevent that from happening? And that's where awareness becomes very critical, especially involving youth. How do we reach this message to the youth of the world, starting from India, but not just restricted to India? So this becomes very, very critical, and that's where there is so much positive work to do. That and work always requires guidance. So such work, such forums, and the thoughts of such great people as Annaji and Dilip ji definitely have to be taken forward, published, spoken about in many forums, so that many people get onto this idea, so that after the lockdown, it is not life as usual, business as usual. We don't want to get there yet again, because we concretely see the impact on nature. So India has a very important role to play, and we have a very important role to play in taking this active effort to make sure not just India, but the whole of the world is a much better place to live in. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. I request Dr. Madan Kumar, known for his sharp reflections, to reflect upon this video for 5 minutes. Madan sir, please.
The prayer is, the Dilip ji has rightly said, and in fact, Anachi has reinforced in his own style, and Adi ji, the living person, has given his own thing. It is only the challenge which remains to me as a person, as a developmental professional, as a practitioner. How do I become a good instrument to take this to the common man who is in poor or who is in poverty? And how do I make him convince this? That's the thing. The ecocentric view, which clearly says that we need to give a value to all living organisms. That is the perspective in which it is. How do I make a frugal consumption as a way of life? And how do I impart this particular message of voluntary simplicity to all the people across the globe? This has to be how we can insist. Dilip ji has rightly said that from linear to circular, from human-centeredness to nature-centeredness, from wealth to well-being, from human development index to gross happiness index. Well said. Now, the biggest challenge which we have in front of us is how do we see the frugal consumption as a way of life? And it is a pride, and it needs to be a pride for everyone that this sort of a way of life I am living and I should be. Now, this lifestyle, the subject is the corona and the lifestyle change. Now, where am I in terms of my lifestyle change? What is this lifestyle? Basically demands upon the interest, opinions, and behaviors and behavioral orientation. This is what lifestyle is all about. How do I bring this? And there needs to be a behavioral change in the whole process. How do I bring this behavioral change? This behavioral change starts from attitude and attitude factors, infrastructure factors, and the facilitator factors. In the attitude, what sort of a behavioral change which I need to bring and which I will make my family, my community to join it. And our own living experience in my own life, being a Kendra worker, to have a voluntary simplicity to my way of life, and now being wedded to a different organizational ethos, there the community development or the community orientation is of a very higher order, wherein which recently we had a very good discussion in the context of Corona in one of the villages in Banswara over the phone, because where I was working for some time. He said his life is not affected at all. He is very happy with all his means. Hence, it is only as Dilipji rightly said, industrialization has only made us much more vulnerable to all this Corona impact. Now the situation is not brooding over the past. How do we build on and how do we move forward from this place to from this place to the best? So this is a challenge which we need to have, for which we are making efforts to bring the community together to make a choice, and we are trying to offer them a choice and list them the consequences of their choices and see that how best they can see the interconnectedness from the circular thing which Dilipji was saying, from linear to circular, how best they could see it, how best they can make a conscious choice, how best they can make a differentiation between a standard of living and a quality of life, how best they can bring the interconnectedness, how best they can manage the resources towards this change, and how do they see a change as a constant factor. And for this, the demand and the call is, how many are there to be a role models in this? How many are there to show such way of life is a meaningful and purposeful life? And that alone makes and to lead a sustainable life which will build communities for generations. This is my prayer, and I wish to be an instrument in this. Thanks to Annaji, Dilipji, and Vasudevji in particular, and Adijis for the valuable inputs. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. Now it is question and answer time. Participants can unmute themselves and ask the questions to the panel. One of the person has given me in a WhatsApp a question which says whether gross national happiness index is it possible in India. Maybe he means that Bhutan is a small nation, so it is possible. Whether it is possible in India, can somebody reflect on it?
India is the only country which has said happiness is the purse of life. It is the basis of life. It is the beginning and the end of life. Therefore, throughout India, we call it moksha, salvation, liberation, or whatever. But it is basically Brahmananda. That is the aim of life. Therefore, India is the only country which even the commonest man understands the end of life, the aim of life is to have that ananda. Therefore, every moment he tries to move towards it. Therefore, as far as the largeness of the population is not a hindrance, because we have got a very great cultural advantage. Therefore, Indian gross national happiness is not a very big challenge for us. It is possible for us. Number two, in spite of all the modernization, there are a number of villages, the number of units, economic units, geographical units, which they try to live self-contained manner. Therefore, these are the nuclei for the happy society. And then we have got a number of ashramas. Ashrama is the place of rest. Therefore, these are also the starting point for happiness. Therefore, we have got a very good mechanism, which has perhaps because of neglect, it has fallen into disuse. They can be revived, they can be used, they can be, if necessary, modernized with all modern communication problem. This example can be put in front of the people. It is not very difficult. If Bhutan can do it with such a small population, and India can certainly do it with a very, very long history where search for the perfect ananda has been the aim of life. Therefore, I don't think it is very difficult for India to have a gross national happiness as the end of life, the aim of life.
If I may add to this, when we are talking of GDP, we are not negating happiness. So GDP looks at artha. So as Annaji mentioned, each being is looked at as Satchit Ananda Swarupa. So Ananda Swarupa is inbuilt, so that's the Swarupa. So to be able to achieve it, one of the aspects is Artha or wealth, material prosperity. But the Indian wisdom clearly says that is not sufficient. It needs to be multidimensionalized. So we bring in Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So even Moksha is considered as Artha, just that it's Paramartha, or ultimate wealth. So when happiness is looked at as wealth, now that is what we are looking at. Instead of unidimensionalizing it, we are expanding the scope of the growth, expanding the scope of the framework to guide us as a nation in our growth. So that is built into the nation. So it does not negate GDP or economic prosperity. In fact, it adds on to it.
Thank you, sir.
The gross happiness index, basically from the Bhutan's experience, is building on the spiritual perspectives of Annaji's and Adi. It's more of making people of being together, the collective strength and the solidarity which they could give some concrete results of being together and being of good fraternity, and with that which could give us a lot of mileage in terms of their satisfaction and happiness together. And that's the perspective in the gross national happiness index has been talked about in the Bhutan as such. So this is possible, and our own effort in this direction is to see that. They see the gross happiness index in the Bhutan national happiness, which is psychological well-being, health, education, the cultural diversity, the community vitality, the ecological diversity, and the living standards. All this constitutes the gross happiness index of the Bhutan as such. In fact, effort has to be made. Already indicators have been developed by Bhutan, wherein which during our community development process, when we build our nested institutions, we strive to see all these factors brought into it and see that their solidarity, their being together has a meaning and purpose in life.
Thanks a lot, sir. Sir, one more question from the watcher. People are telling the development model right now is wrong. So what is the new model of development? Whether it is evolved or to be evolved, how it will be taken up to the people and the acceptance level of the people? So the question has been asked.
So Gandhiji tried to answer it in such a way that you produce what you use and you use what you produce. When you produce what you use, then you know what exactly you need. And then when you use what you produce, then you know your production model, what are the flaws in it. If it cannot be done at individual level, it can be done at a small community level. In fact, Laurie Baker, when he came from England to India, he was struck by this idea of Gandhiji, that every village or every geographical zone, it is all self-contained. Therefore, it is not impossible for producing self-contained units. Therefore, that model has been very much there. Then, what is science, what is not science, it depends upon your own concept of science. Nobody used to say, yeah, gobar gas plant has got more science than a nuclear plant. Therefore, the whole West has been depending upon only high energy physics. Now only they have entered into low energy or ordinary energy. Even your gobar gas plant is a machine or a useful machine. The West has come around to see only now. Therefore, India, it is not impossible for us to produce such a model. We do have a very good model. Gandhiji suggested. Therefore, he says, when you produce what you want, you know how difficult it is to produce. Then you are very, very careful in using that thing. When you produce what you want, you know how difficult it is to produce. Therefore, you develop a kind of respect to other people who produce. And when you use a part, you know how difficult it is for a partner to make it. Otherwise, you see a modern cinema, a hero is one who will break at least 100 parts in one scene. Arey Baba, to make a part, it makes so much of energy. Therefore, when you use a thing which you have made with your own hand, or your neighbor has made, you have seen how difficult it is for them to make. Therefore, the self-contained society is not a dream. It has been much of a reality. Then it is very little, except perhaps salt and kerosene and some matchbox. Our villages, they could produce whatever they want. Therefore, there are even today, there are ashrams which can try to produce whatever they want, and to do without it, which they cannot produce. Therefore, it is a technology. But for it to go on a very large scale, Mr. Adinarayanan made a very good point. One, the pollution doesn't have a geographical limitation. You hit some corner of the world, it affects the whole world. Second, by yoga, India has shown to the world that you can develop a mechanism. These are the two very vital points he made. Therefore, these geographical borders are going to be, as far as such problems are concerned, they are going to simply fade away. Second, India has shown to the world. In fact, Swami Vivekananda goes to the extent of saying, during the Greek period, during the Roman period, during the English period, during the Arab period, whenever people have tried to unite the world, India has given the whole world, using that communication mechanism, India has given the message of Vedanta, the divinity of the human soul. Therefore, now even Corona, who knows, it may be a God-given opportunity for us. It has united the world. It is in an hour of trouble. Therefore, this is again, man is a store of all happiness. Man has around him whatever he needs. Such things have to be reminded to man. It is not very impossible, this lifestyle, provided Thoreau has tried it. Even such great people have tried it again and again in different corners of the world. Therefore, humanity has always been trying to contain, create self-contained units. Even Sri Aurobindo has talked about in great detail where you will have to be self-contained, where you have to depend upon others, how to go on expanding yourself. As you expand, the dependency will become more and more ideological than physical. That is the 15th volume of Aurobindo. He puts it very beautifully. Therefore, it is not impossible to produce such a lifestyle. And if you don't learn it on our own, nature will teach you the hard way.
To add to the great message of Annaji, from Dilip ji's video, what I understand, I'm a student of Indian Itihasas and Puranas. Ramayana and Mahabharata, if we follow it closely, we understand that from ancient times, India has been having a three-tier society. So the one tier would be the Vana or the Aranya, the forest society. The second would be the Grama or the rural society. And the third would be the Nagara or the urban society. Now, comparatively, the world over, we follow a two-tier society, urban and rural. The forest society is not so very well recognized, or they have become just sanctuaries and so on. But in Indian Itihasas, for example, all the narration starts with, for example, in Naimisharanya, which is a forest. So there, the niyamas, taking from Dilip ji's words, it would be a labor-intensive, mechanism, and the focus would be on knowledge or expansion of the antakarana more than the bahyakarana, the usage of the outer instrument. It would be on knowledge, on gaining jnana and vichara and so on. If we come to a grama, the grama can be a carbon neutral energy, and technology allowed, which would, translate into, Dilip ji clearly explained what a carbon neutral mechanism is. A carbon neutral mechanism is a very good mechanism. And then if we come to Nagara, which is not, which is very well within the limits, then a carbon intensive or a energy intensive mechanism, if it is allowed in graded base. Because if we look at our Itihasa Puranas, they give something like this methodology, where a Nagara, what is allowed in a Nagara is very different from what is allowed in a Grama, and which is very different from what is allowed in a Vana or aranya. So this type of distinction, this type of differentiated mechanism becomes very important for the purushartha, for everyone to feel satisfied, to feel fulfilled. Because when we look at the desire patterns of various kinds of people, now predominantly because of lack of knowledge and awareness and distancing from the source, what Annaji beautifully mentioned, where if you are a creator, then you understand the value of something. If you are not a creator, you don't understand the value of it. That means you are distanced away from it. What is the value of a paper? It will just be 2 rupees in your eyes, while actually a tree has given its life so that it can be in your hands. So many people have worked to make it available in your hands, but you don't see that value because you are distanced away from the source of production. So to be able to bridge this gap, we need to differentiate between consumerism and creation. So what Annaji is talking of is creation, not consumerism. Now in the popular world, what we are stuck with is consumerism. The popular economics is driven by the the buzzword of consumerism. You consume more and more. That's how economy grows. For example, if you cook at home, you are not contributing to the GDP. While if you eat out in and the most, you should be eating out in McDonald's, because only then you would be contributing a lot more because it's FDI based. So these kinds of mechanisms drive the current narrative. And hence we need to shift from this narrative, because otherwise the policymakers, the powers that be, are going to use this framework to evaluate all of our actions, and hence our actions get defeated. All the good, goodness and virtue that as a civilization we have accumulated goes down the drain because the modern frameworks cannot accommodate them. That's why we need these thought processes to spread and rigorous frameworks to be evolved so that we can analyze things and convince people.
There's a question from one of the participants, Kavya Shri. As we all wish to make Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam's dream to come true, what are the possibilities of India to become a developed country within 2020, she's asking. And another question she is asking is how we can make India as a developed country in this situation.
When the Kendra produced the Akshay Vikas and Samagra Vikas, we sent copies to Dr. Abdul Kalam. Abdul Kalam marked some passages and referred back to us. Therefore, he is also for the sustainable development. Therefore, development with the sustainability is going to be a big change. There are small experiments which have been done. For example, one tea gardener in Darjeeling. Is it possible to shift from inorganic farming to organic farming without loss of money? He did it and proved, and he wrote a research paper. Therefore, there are people who are taking development, economy, environmental awareness together and look at the problem in an integrated way. But unfortunately, these instances are mentioned only in specialist magazines. It is not yet part of the common medium. There are people, yes. For example, food production in the world. We are used to food production through organic fertilizer, inorganic fertilizer. Many farmers are afraid if we just go over to organic farming, there may be loss of production. That man has proved it is not so. Therefore, if you take all factors into consideration, it is possible to move down from inorganically fertilized farming, food production to organically produced food production without much loss. Or whatever be the small loss, we will be able to absorb it in cost factors. Therefore, there are tremendous experiments that are taking place. Therefore, when Abdul Kalam himself will agree that whether it is 2020 or a developed society, he will also agree that it is not that the cost of nature. He is a man from rural area. He is from Rameshwaram. He himself came and inaugurated our Green Rameshwaram program. He knows that the environment supersedes every other concern today. That even Abdul Kalam or any great scientist who has got the well-being of the whole world in his mind will not say science at the cost of environment. Therefore, more intelligent people will come together, put their energies together and find out how it is not a compromise. It is environment first, environment next, environment last. That kind of development, even Abdul Kalam will agree that neglecting environment, we cannot have a development. But ultimately, people have calculated this weather, the monsoon missing the time, the heat increasing, the coastal area being flooded, what it means to the economy, what it means to the food production, what it means to the cost of food production. People have already made a calculation. Therefore, environment is costing us a hell of a lot. In terms of food production, in terms of food distribution, in terms of fish availability, in every feature, this environmental destruction is taking a very big toll. Therefore, Abdul Kalam, his sacred name, it is there. But you should not forget, he also was basically an environmentalist. He lent his name for the Green Rameshwaram project. Therefore, if we put forth the arguments in front of him, we will very happily agree that we will have to find out a way where development is not at the cost of environment, development with environment.
To just quickly add to this, our erstwhile Honorable President, Dr. Abdul Kalam ji, he, to be able to put India on par with all developed nations, one of the things that he did was he initiated what is called the TIFAC Core. TIFAC Core were core research centers to come as centers for research excellence in some critical areas like networking, cybersecurity, in various kinds of technologies. I believe it is now important to expand it to also something like cow-based technologies. As Annaji was beautifully mentioning, with biogas, you can produce electricity, you can power your electrical vehicles. There are research papers which show that in 14 kilograms of native cow dung, you can produce about 6 kilowatt hour of energy, which is huge. That can power the nation more than nuclear energy can power it. What it requires is, you need the research wing, the ministry, the political wing, and the bureaucratic wing to come together. And these need to be initiated in universities and academia so that everyone gets the awareness of these. That's how Sri Abdul Kalam worked in envisioning the TIFAC Core, which he established in universities where there would be university, industry, and government participation. Similar models need to be developed for Indian knowledge systems and Indian technologies, including yoga, Ayurveda, Gomata, cow-based technologies, and so much more.
Building on Adiji's and Annaji's viewpoint, first we need to understand, as in the context of Kulkarni ji is saying, that what is development, whether the present mode of development is what as we aspire for. What is a society aspires for? Development has been defined where community comes together, where mobilize and manage the resources to fulfill the aspirations. Now the question in front of us is, what are the aspirations? Is the aspirations are in tune with integral ecology, which we have been talking about, where in which the environment has been valued much. So that ecocentric view, that is the core thing which we need to inculcate to all the students. In fact, Vivekananda Kendra, NARDP has taken a very right mission of where Abdul Kalam himself has come and initiated the project Green Rameshwaram, and we have been doing earnest attempts in this in terms of renovating the water bodies and making an environmental awareness camp, making an energy audit, making an eco audit. All this constitutes towards a step towards this direction. So development has to be seen a comprehensive and a holistic perspective, rather than not increasing the standard of living alone, where in which the drainage of resources is to the maximum. How do we see, or how do we live in tune with nature? That's the call of Vivekananda Kendra NARDP, which everyone need to look at it and also build their aspirations around it and build a lifestyle which will make a meaningful dent in their own life.
I will add
Yes. Yes, sir.
I will add two more points. One, a number of good individuals do not make good environment. Therefore, there has to be a social mechanism, a legal mechanism or social culture where people do not cancel each other out, they contribute their energies together. That I think a bit of individualism, that is the typical Western model, atomization of the society. They just broke the family first and then they broke the individual also is being broken. Therefore, people coming together and making viable, productive groups, that is a very, very important. And then in all developmental models, education is a very, very great resource. Therefore, once upon a time we were calling it education ministry. Now we call it human resource ministry. Education is a part of the developmental process. What kind of education? Environmental education. Therefore, we have failed very miserably. Our books have just started. Whatever Dr. Madan was mentioning, all those aspects have to be included into the education. Our children have to be made aware of it. Therefore, when they grow, after all, they are going to inherit the whole society. We should not bequeath to him not only an irresponsible way of living, but irresponsible people and nature which is not cooperating with man, or man who is not cooperating with nature. Therefore, we will have to train our young people to act in tune with nature. Therefore, education is a very, very great wealth. In any process, they call it a knowledge society. What kind of knowledge? Environmental knowledge. Therefore, the human being as the source of all happiness, all energy, all intelligence, to make the fullest use of him and make him combine, now they call it social intelligence, they call it emotional intelligence, all these aspects will add to his wealth. In fact, that is the nation's wealth. Therefore, it is not only a number of good individuals, good models, but they are combining in a meaningful way. That is a huge experiment that the world is doing. Even the kibbutz of the Israel society, they could not get productive societies. They failed. Therefore, how to make people come together and work as productive, creative, harmonious groups? It is going to be a huge national challenge or world's challenge. They say emotional intelligence and social intelligence, they are also to be included in our process of education. Education is going to be a very, very big tool. Any change in human attitude towards nature, towards other human beings, others, towards oneself, it has to come through only education.
Thanks, panelist. There is one question from one of the participants. This we can take it as a last question. Kindly share a few points for self-enrichment which can be percolated to the students.
Naradapas produced a very beautiful book authored by Dilip Kulkarni and translated to Tamil. I hope it also comes in English. Day-to-day life and environment. It is a beautiful book. After all, he has put his lifetime's experience into it. Very simple tips. Therefore, every action we vote through our lifestyle. Therefore, if do you use an individual vehicle or a public transport? We switch off the fan when we go out of the room. We use a tap or use collect water from the bucket and use it. What is our waste production? Therefore, through our individual lives, we can start learning. Then we can educate others, we can teach others, therefore produce a society. That book it deserves much greater publicity. I hope there is an English version also. In Tamil, it is an excellent book. Therefore, that is the message which we can give to the very young people. And there is a very concrete, there is not too much of theory, very, very practical, very day-to-day life, down to the earth solution to the environmental problem. That's a good service done by Dilip Kulkarni and translated to Tamil by our Koilpatti friend, Professor Jagat Jyoti.
This is a very important point that Annaji has mentioned. Stalwarts like Dilip ji bring that vague theory, abstract ideas of theory into very concrete reality, actionable aspects. And that is what motivates many students. The Honorable Supreme Court passed an order that, in all schools and institutions, environmental sciences should be made compulsory. But that's a theoretical approach, which is good, which at least spreads a little bit of awareness. But it has to be combined with living role models, or role models like Dilip ji, who have through their life shown how to integrate all of those principles in daily living. If that is not brought into the regular educational framework and content, then actually students are left high and dry. They feel inspired to do something, but how do you take it forward? For example, they are introduced to United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. So SDGs are introduced, but how do you take it forward? How do you actionate on it? That's where a visit to Nardep Center, a visit to Vivekananda Kendra, and such places that are that show how to practically live these principles all through India, that becomes very, very critical. So role models like Dilip ji should be made available and accessible through their publications and their simplicity to the whole educational student base.
Sridhar is going to show the book. Good.
Yes. So this is the book. This is the book, Dinasari Valvil Purachulal Udalu. Tamil translated version of Dilip Kulkarni's book. It contains the maximum, simple tips on how to live environment-friendly life. Anything more? Any other questions are there?
I think we should end it in a very positive note. That book forms an excellent finale. That should be our practical, just like a train guide or bus guide. It should be our life guide. Very
Superb, sir. Thanks a lot. I think it's time to end the session. Thanks for the panelists. One person was talking from a lot of literatures and practical applications. Some person was another person was talking about the Idigasas, Puranas, and even the practical application, the comparison between this. And our Madan sir was speaking on the practical application, how to take it to the community. So that's a very strong message, I suppose, from this particular webinar. So how to take, even Annaji concluded the previous question like that one. How to take it to the community, how to make the people unite and join together to achieve this particular objective of development that was shown by Dilip ji and our panelists. So how to bring that? So that is the main agenda before us. Something concrete has to be developed, and that has to be placed to the people. This is the right time, and this is the right time we have organized this webinar also. And this should continue, and a lot of such practical solutions and more modules should come to the people. Only then such a community organization is possible. Thanks a lot for the panelists, Annaji and Adi Narayanji and our beloved Madan Kumar sir. Thanks a lot for coming over here and answering our questions and throwing your reflections. And thanks, Kulkarni ji, Dilip Kulkarni ji, for your wonderful presentation. Thanks a lot for the things.
Thank you very much for this wonderful organization. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the participants.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, participants. Participants, நான் சொன்ன மாதிரி feedback form வந்து கீழே கொடுத்திருக்கேன். So that has to be submitted. I think a lot of students have also attended. So please fill up this feedback form, and so that we will share it to the panelists to how to take it forward. Thanks a lot. We'll conclude with a Shanti Mantra that we normally take it. எல்லோரும் இன்புற்றிருக்க நினைப்பதுவே அல்லாமல் வேறொன்றும் அறியேன் பராபரமே. ஓம் சாந்தி சாந்தி சாந்தி. Thanks a lot. Meet you all in another thought-provoking webinar.